welcome to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I'm Bob McDonald, and joining me, of course, is my co-host, Matt Dudek.
Hey there, Bob.
Matt, of course, you can find on Twitter at Horizon Matt. You can follow us on Twitter as well at HorizonRT. You can pull us up on the web at HorizonRoundtable.com, and be sure to follow us, subscribe to us wherever podcasts are found. And Matt, did you notice the intro music is different?
I did notice the different intro music. What's up with that? What do we got going on here, Bob?
Well, we will explain that in a moment. But before we do that, because we want to do because as we've mentioned many times, this is clearly our favorite. This is our new favorite episode every year, where we get everybody from we get play-by-play voices from the media on. So.
You know why this is my favorite episode? Because essentially we introduce everybody and we let them talk and we shut up. It's the best.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So I'm just going to go ahead and introduce everybody in no particular order. We'll start with Brady Labor from Northern Kentucky. Always a pleasure.
What's going on, guys? Wow, that's a lot of pressure to go first. I don't know why you ran. I guess because I called in first. Is that the only reason? Maybe I should have.
No, I'm just doing
the
totally
middle
random.
of the show like other folks are going to do.
Yeah, I'm doing it. It's totally random. Sorry.
That's okay.
And then of course Neil Rule. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Glad to be here. It's a tradition of college basketball season.
Yes. Absolutely. And then joining us, Dan Hasty, joining us this year.
Hello, everybody. There's like 9 people on this call, so it's basically what, Fox College Football Saturday. Good to see everybody.
Something like that, yeah.
Rough, Dan.
Then there's Rob Schmidt. Rob, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate this. You're keeping me from having to go to an apple butter festival with my wife, so. This is not only your favorite, but my favorite program.
Obviously, she doesn't listen.
No, she doesn't. She's out trying to find a new craft show to go to.
All right, there you go. And then we got John Nolan. John, welcome, sir.
Bob, Matt, thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone.
That's right. The John Nolan, by the way. Like
the John Nolan.
John Nolan's fame.
We will explain this in a second, but I did want to mention joining us a little later on will be Greg Registraw and Chris Collins. But John, I know you noticed the intro music this time around. This requires some explanation for those of you who do not follow John Nolan on Twitter, and by the way, you all should for many different reasons. John_G_Nolan at Twitter, on Twitter. But yeah. So John, go ahead and explain what happened to you in August.
Yeah, going back to early August, and by the way, I can't guarantee there's really much benefit of following me on Twitter. I guess you can get some pretty Fort Wayne basketball notes and whatnot. But yeah, just back in early August, besides calling games for the Mastodons, I also do play-by-play for Padres High A affiliate in the Midwest League, the Fort Wayne Tin Cap. So I guess I could be considered a baseball guy too. And we're actually recording this here, the weekend here of the wild card round, Major League Baseball playoffs. But you go back to early August, and New York Mets closer Edwin Diaz was sort of taking the baseball world by storm at that point, not only for his dominant performance on the mound, but for what became a fan favorite with his walkout music, Narco, that you heard there by Blaster Jacks and Timmy Trumpet. So coming up later this year, New Year's Eve, I'm set to be married to my wonderful fiance, Nicole, and she is not necessarily a big baseball fan. So kind of just as a joke, I said to her, hey, we should use this song as our wedding walkout. And she, rolled her eyes at me. I said, well, what if I, let's be silly. I put this out on Twitter. I say, if we get 3,900 likes, then, this is going to be our song. And of course, the internet being the internet, it did take off and far surpassed that within an hour. So now we have to wait and see, because actually the Mets are playing a do or die game against the Padres tonight. So we'll see. As popular as that is, I think it's still resting on Edwin's performance here in the prime time.
I keep calling, and by the way, I keep calling Timmy Trumpet Tommy Trumpet, so that's how much I know about. And by the way,
Mr. Trumpet to you.
And congratulations, obviously, on your upcoming nuptials. And how salty was your fiance when you realized she completely lowballed the like number?
Yeah, actually, pull the curtain back. I think she might have said 39,000, not 3,900. It might have gotten lost in translation there, but she's being a good sport about it, thankfully.
It's probably did get 39,000 likes after it's all said and done. Jeez. Okay, so I totally promised that we're actually going to talk basketball, since obviously we have.
I thought we were breaking down the Padres bullpen options too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so it's funny. It's always a convergence, and I'm actually going to open this up to all of you guys. Always a convergence, because we do all of you do so many different things besides the Horizon League. John, you mentioned you mentioned the minor league baseball. Neil, I know you do soccer. Dan, I know you also do. You're also you also do minor league baseball as well, but. When it comes to kind of that diversity in terms of your range, if you will, of doing play-by-play for various different sports, what does that help you? How does that help you when you get back into November and it's Horizon League basketball season?
Well, I guess I'll jump in with that. I mean, I think if anything, and I think a lot of the other guys would tell you this too, I think it's just as important about connecting one season to another in terms of having consistency. It's important to not go away for 2-3 months, vacation season is great and everything, but you try to mix that in alongside, being able to stay busy, to stay involved. So, if you're doing this right, you can find something that connects the baseball season to the off season and what gets you through, or vice versa. And, I will say this, I love baseball, but I like calling basketball more than calling baseball. I enjoy the pace. I enjoy the atmosphere, especially when you're, comparing, Division I college basketball to, say, the high A level baseball. It's especially non-conference season. And I know a lot of you guys get a chance to go see some really great places, but yeah, I think just being able to find a way to bridge the gap between one, off season to another is vital.
Hey guys, it's Neil. So yeah, I just kind of piggyback a little bit on what Dan said there. I just find it useful because I do the soccer and the college basketball and lots of talk show work too. I just like staying in the rhythm, if anything else. And the sports are the sports. I'm a little bit different. I prepare for all the different games I do in all the different sports in the same way, like as far as charts and stuff like that, which come to find out, I guess, is a little bit different, but that's the way I kind of came up doing it. So for me, it's just kind of staying in the flow. You baseball guys, you guys are all animals, man. Like for real, you don't get a day off for like a month at a time. Like you guys are absolute animals. So I mean, I enjoy doing basketball because you get like a day off after a game for the most part. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I just like to stay in the flow, man. Like that's it. Just the producer in your ear. The pressure, the cameras, if we're doing the TV, all that kind of stuff. I love that. I feel sad for people that go to a job and they go and they sit down and they do kind of the same thing every single day. They'll never get that rush of a producer counting you down in your ear about when you're ready to go live. I mean, I kind of equate it like this, like, it's got to be, it's got to be the most addicting thing in the world, like drugs included. I'm imagining, because it is the absolute best feeling. It's the highest high, and that's what I enjoy about it. So it's just more opportunity to do that.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll just liken that to, at this point, college basketball is pretty much a 12-month commitment for players with the way that the NCAA has tweaked the rules in the last decade or so, where guys are allowed to be in the gym on campus, nearly year round with coaches almost. So kind of same for us as broadcasters, just trying to stay as sharp as possible and, continue working at the craft year round.
So my question is kind of a follow-up to that then for any of you that want to chime in is how much are you able to kind of stay in contact with your programs? Like how in the loop are you at this point? Are you coming out of your other, your baseball season or whatever? Are you kind of trying to play catch up? Like where are you all at in your prep getting into this season?
I'll say this. I think one of the things that I think is important, and it depends on at what capacity you serve the particular university, but for example, I'm seasonal, so I don't really do much with Detroit Mercy outside of college basketball season. So if anything, I think it's important to try and stay in touch with perhaps a coach or two throughout the off season. I don't think there's a lot that's really required above and beyond that. I think it's just good that they hear from you, they know you're interested, they know you're involved, and that way, if nothing else, you just remind them that you're part of Feller Nation. You're one of the guys. Right? So I think it's important to at least be visible in that way. But for me personally, I live on the other side of the state of Michigan, so the abilities to get to practices are few and far between. So I don't really get that opportunity very often. So, I don't think they really need a whole lot from me personally, but if they do, they always know that I'm a phone call away. And then once the season gets underway, it's kind of like we never left. We just kind of jump right back in.
Yeah, no, I would say, Dan, just to again kind of jump on the back of that, I would imagine that it's kind of as my career's grown too. It becomes so sectional during the time of the year where there are a lot of fans that are more into, because I'm one of the few honest ones about this. I don't really follow recruiting because it doesn't matter to me until they're here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like with it, who Oakland's recruiting and stuff like that, it doesn't make a difference to me until they're on campus, they're on the team, and they're going to play this year. So then that's when I choose to do the deep dive and everything like that. I'm like you, Dan. I mean, I'll go play golf with Campy a couple times, and we'll play poker a couple of times throughout the summer and stuff like that with some of the other media people and all those kinds of folks. But very rarely do I ever ask him about what's going on or how's things. If there's a prominent question, or like when Jamal Cain got signed with the Heat and stuff like that, we'll talk about it for a few minutes. But I'm very similar to you, Dan. I mean, when it's not college basketball season, I'm kind of paid to know about other stuff at that time. So I know about other stuff, kind of like you guys with the baseball and stuff like that. So, the wheels just keep on turning, man. And then, as we get going now we kind of fire up the engines and get in there.
What's funny is that, and I think any baseball guy or probably any sport, I think when you're in terms of broadcasting, you are it's very much like flipping a switch. It's a light switch. It's either off or it's on. And, baseball season always tends to sneak up on you in the sense of you look around and you're like, oh, there's 2 weeks to opening day. And it's only because it's a very much on or off situation. Once you're in baseball mode, then it's all of a sudden like you're doing everything. But it feels like whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball, whether it's any sport, you go from doing absolutely nothing to doing absolutely everything.
I'm a little more fortunate here at Youngstown State because I work for the university's athletic department. So, I'm in athletic marketing and licensing and tickets. So I'm on campus, every day. So I have an opportunity to go over and see our coaching staff during the season, during the off season. As was mentioned before, it's become a year-round thing where the kids are pretty much on campus, even during the summer. We had a football game yesterday against North Dakota and had a chance to, talk to a few of the players who were doing our giveaway items. So I'm able to stay in touch with them because, I work in the stadium for football, but, Beakley Center is a short walk down Stadium Drive. So I'm over there watching practice every so often. I'll probably end up going to their scrimmage, a couple of weeks when they scrimmage Indiana State, and travel with the team there. So I'm a little more fortunate in that I'm kind of around them all the time because I work on campus in the athletic department.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about what Dan and Neil said, and this is Brady from Northern Kentucky. Since it's been a while since I chimed in, but I'm glad you guys kind of admitted that it is a seasonal job for you guys and you don't always have year-round contact, because I think the impression everybody gets when they say, oh, you're the play-by-play guy, you're obviously dialed in year-round, what about this, what about that? And the reality of the situation is most universities don't reach out to you until they need you, or at least the one I work for, and Northern Kentucky is not the only college I work for. There's another college right here in my neighborhood, Thomas More University, and they're, a longtime D3 that transitioned into NAIA, and now they're going to go into Division II. And I have much more contact with them than I do with Northern Kentucky. And it's just simply because, once you get to the Division I, it's a machine, man. And sometimes they don't need you on a daily basis unless, like Rob said, you work for the university and you're there on campus. Sometimes in years past, and it's better now, but I would find out 2 weeks before, the tip-off for the first game, hey, Brady, are you available? You want to be our play-by-play guy? And, that's kind of, this is my 13th season, and I thought I would be more dialed in, but, I've been just busy doing other stuff. And, and to me, it's like file cabinets. When it comes to college basketball, I got to break out the college basketball, file cabinet, because right now I'm eyeball deep in high school football and college football. And so when people think that you're an insider, unless it's in season, that's a lot of times not the case, even though you do try to get to a practice or two before, the first exhibition game. The reality of the situation is you might have to just use contacts to kind of feel you through it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, definitely, more casual following of the program. I'm fortunate with Purdue Fort Wayne that there's been so much continuity with the staff, and a storyline for the Mastodons this year is that John Kaufman, coming off of being the Horizon League Men's Basketball Coach of the Year, he's now locked in thanks to a contract extension through 2030. And for that matter, the assistants have all been in place now for at least 4 years. I mean, in some cases longer. So definitely friendly with the staff and keep in touch. And sometimes actually they'll come out to baseball games in downtown Fort Wayne and keeping tabs that regard. Also, the local media in Fort Wayne really does an outstanding job of covering Purdue Fort Wayne. So I will just tune in. I don't have to be the one asking questions, but tune in when Coach Kaufman or some of the players are being interviewed on local radio or local TV. So definitely keeping abreast of the program in that regard. I'll say, this call really actually is kind of like a turn on the switch. All right, let me pay attention more now to the other teams around the league. Thanks to you guys at the Horizon Roundtable. I'm usually making sure to keep up with your feed on Twitter and seeing what kind of major headlines are coming out from other programs. But, right now, if you ask me to do my vote for, preseason picks and stuff, I'm not prepared. But, hopefully after this call and then some research in the weeks to come, then we're ready for tip.
Well, Matt, we were going to actually ask everybody to vote because we got preview week coming week. We were actually going to ask everybody to vote this year, but probably good we didn't.
I think what we just learned is these are the best guys to talk to, but we don't even need to talk Horizon League basketball. Like, let's just talk about no, I'm just kidding. I love all those answers, honestly, because that's exactly what I would expect. Like,
yeah.
you all are professionals, and we get to hear your professionalism in Horizon League, which is great. But to kind of hear that context of, what that looks like for you all outside of the scope of this league is really nice. Me and Bob were just talking, like, man, love this episode. I love hearing this side of it from y'all.
Absolutely. Loving it. And I'm glad John, I'm glad you mentioned the John Kaufman contract extension. I want to segue right into Purdue Fort Wayne itself. I mean, this is a team that in year 2 of the Horizon League co-share of the regular season championship last season. Got all your major guys coming back, with the exception of Jalen Pickens, obviously, coming back for their extra year. is it a matter? I mean, given kind of what, and we'll talk a little bit about this later about some of the additional competition within probably around the top 5 or 6 teams. How tough is it going to be? How much of an advantage is it to have have that core back for Purdue Fort Wayne that won so many games last season, coming back to essentially defend that regular season crown this year?
Yeah, needless to say, it's just becoming exceedingly rare in college sports, men's basketball specifically, to have continuity. So for 8 of the top 9 guys in the rotation to be back, to have the entire coaching staff back, that in itself, I think, puts you ahead of the curve a bit. And then you add in that it's, not just 8 of 9 coming back from a team that was in the bottom tier of the conference, but, 8 of 9 coming back from a team that last year was able to get a share of the regular season title. On top of that, between a couple of freshmen and a transfer, I think one thing that Coach Kaufman has said coming into this season that'll be a new challenge for them, but really a welcomed one, is that he's going to have some tougher decisions to make when it comes to his rotation and just balancing the depth. But again, obviously, that's a good problem to have, and I think this is a group that definitely, has its eyes set, not just on the regular season, but frankly for Purdue Fort Wayne, now a Division I program for about 20 years. The one box that's left to check for them is making it to the NCAA tournament. They've won regular season titles back in the Summit League. They made it to a conference championship game. They've upset ranked opponents like IU a couple of times, but they haven't been to the big dance yet. So right now, thanks to the fact that not only do they have everybody back, but in some cases it's guys like Jared Godfrey who is taking advantage of that bonus year because of COVID. So his 5th go around, as well as some others. So I don't want to say it's now or never, but this is definitely the year to take that next step forward for the Dons.
Speaking of contract extensions, if I understand correctly, Rob, Jared Calhoun also got a contract extension this year, and has most of his core coming back, and brought in a bunch of new faces, except for maybe in the case of Adrian Nelson, who everybody knows here, I think, coming in to play for Youngstown State. So when you look at the kind of the makeup of Youngstown State, with that core, including Garrett Covington, who we didn't see all last year, and he is coming back this year too. What do you think is going to be Jared Calhoun's biggest challenge in terms of kind of getting the new guys in and getting them on the same page as the vets?
Well, I think, the thing that they finally have, and this is Jared's 6th year, and the extension, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is good through 2026. So, the continuity is there, but the depth is there. I think people that watched us last year, win 19 games in the league, our school record, 12 Horizon League wins. I think we were solid through the first 6, 7. Now the depth is there. So I think they have a lot of ability now to run different rotations at you. Our guys did a great job, and it's been pretty well documented. In my mind, they hit a home run in the portal. Obviously, Adrian Nelson is one of the crown jewels that they were able to pluck from Northern Kentucky in the portal, along with Malik Green from Canisius, Bryce McBride from Eastern Michigan, and Brandon Rush from Fairleigh Dickinson. So, I think all 4 of those guys could be or will be in the starting lineup. I think you might probably end up seeing 3 of those guys in the starting lineup because you had mentioned Garrett's back, and it's invaluable in today's game, at least for right now in the short term because of COVID. You've got a kid now that's got 6 years under or going into his 6th year. So he knows the game. He knows the league. He was a smart player when he was healthy. He runs the baseline like nobody else. And, this team, and I've had some people, mention to me that this team's a lot more athletic than they've seen in the past. We have legitimate size in addition to that. But I think depth will be the biggest factor. And I think for the most part, Dwayne Cohill now, I think has a really strong supporting cast. And, he's a kid that can at any time, go for 25, but he doesn't have to go for 25 now. So I think, when you start looking at what we bring this year, there's some, now I think you're able to pencil in some numbers. There's not as much of a wild card where, this guy could go for 20 or he might only go for 8. I think now there's a little bit more stability. But defensively, I think we'll make some strides defensively just because we have a little more size and a couple of rim protectors now. I think rebounding will be one of our strong suits. And I think we'll shoot it better from the outside. So this, to me, and I've told a lot of people this, on paper, and again, you never win anything on paper, much like these preseason polls. But this is probably the best roster I've seen on paper in my 21 years. And that includes, and it might be a close maybe 1A, 1B with our team back in 2013 that boasted of a couple of eventual professionals led by Kendrick Perry. So there's a lot of excitement. Even during football season right now, there's still a lot of excitement for men's basketball.
And I'm glad you mentioned, so Brady, when we talk about, obviously Adrian Nelson has moved over to Youngstown State, but you have Chris Brandon in the middle, but you also have the last 2 freshmen of the year returning, along with Trey Robinson and the return of Trayvon Faulkner. When you look at that lineup, where do you see the challenges potentially with that lineup? I mean, because especially this lineup that was within a hair of winning the Horizon League championship again in its short time in Northern Kentucky's short time in the Horizon League.
Well, it's going to be figuring out an identity because they're going to go in a different direction at point guard. Bryson Langdon, as opposed to exercising an extra year of eligibility, decided to go pro. And at 5'9", that wasn't Darren Horn's ideal point guard guy. And he, no offense, but it seemed like he did everything he could to run Langdon off by giving his job away to a freshman in Sam Vincent. And then it eventually came to the point where Langdon forced Darren Horn's hand into putting him back in the lineup because he was so good at leading the team at the point guard position. But, you got Xavier Rhodes coming in. I don't think he's a graduate transfer because he's listed as a redshirt senior. And, with all the COVID going on, if there's an SID listening to this, there's one column, and I think Purdue Fort Wayne does do this, and they're probably the only one in the whole country, as opposed to what class you're in. Please tell us how many years remaining of eligibility you have, because that's more important right now, because you really don't know unless you go to a compliance officer who probably won't tell you because they think that you're going to, reveal government secrets. How long do you have a guy when you bring him in? And I'm assuming Xavier Rhodes is got 1 year left of eligibility. He's played 4 years of college basketball. He played at Florida Southern, a high-level Division II that has made, Link Darner coached there a few years back to a national championship. And, of course, they make regular Elite Eight appearances. And then he was on a national championship team at Northwest Missouri, another D2 school, before that as a freshman. He's a veteran point guard at 6'1", which gives you better size than what you had out of Bryson Langdon. He should be able to run the show once he learns the system. But what that does is that takes Sam Vincent off the ball, because as much as Darren Horn wanted a 6'5" point guard in Sam Vincent, it was pretty obvious, and it may be because he was a freshman, that he was more comfortable playing off the ball. And once Langdon came back into the lineup as the starter at the point, that's, one of the things that, kind of got Northern Kentucky off the schneid last year, because they really struggled in the pre-conference and up until January 1st, where, they lost an embarrassing game against Milwaukee where, they gave up an 18-point lead in the second half, and then they were hit with COVID right after that and were off for about 10 days. Once they came back out of that COVID pause and they readjusted the lineup, because part of that too was Adrian Nelson had COVID and he could not return back immediately. And it kind of changed things. It expanded the role of Chris Brandon to where he wasn't sharing that spot with Adrian anymore. And essentially, Adrian lost his minutes as a result of that, and then eventually decided to transfer out of the program because he probably saw the writing on the wall that not only was Brandon going to take over that spot, but another guy who was redshirting last year, a guy named Emmanuel Zorgbal. They call him I-Man, and that's a guy – he's super athletic, but he is super raw. He redshirted last year as a freshman, but I'm sure a lot of guys, if they were paying attention during warmups, couldn't help but notice him. He's 6'11", 7 foot tall, just gets off the floor as a leaper faster than any guy I've seen in my years at Northern Kentucky. But he's very raw, and he's going to probably take that Adrian Nelson role. So those, the post player, even though Brandon's a veteran, not only to college basketball, but the program, him being in a new role where it's his for sure, and with Rhodes coming in, and then just having everybody else kind of fall into their original places, and how cohesive that will be the key thing for Northern Kentucky. Because in a perfect world, you got Sam Vincent at the 2, your 2 wings are Marquez Warwick and Trayvon Faulkner coming back for, a 5th season as a super senior graduate, whatever you call it in this day and age, plus Trey Robinson coming off the bench as a lockdown defender, and, a sharpshooter in Hubie Preborius as a role player coming off the bench with a specific role. You don't have to rush any freshman that doesn't have experience. You can kind of work them into the mix slowly, as Northern Kentucky does have 3 freshmen that are not expected to have big roles, but it'll be interesting to see how much they'll see the floor here in the early going. So it's really just kind of, for me, figuring out your identity with a brand new point guard who happens to have the size that you wanted, plus he's a veteran presence, even though he's learning a completely new system.
All right. So, Neil, speaking of guys coming back, obviously, you have Jalen Moore coming back. You have Trey Townsend coming back. And then you bring in Rocket Watts. You bring in Keaton Hervey, Lauren Bowman, these new guys. And we've heard Greg Kampe talk about size being an issue this year. When you look at that lineup coming in, it speaks to me speed, basically. What do you think on top of is aside from the size, what do you think is going to be kind of the biggest strength that they're going to have besides that speed they're going to have now?
It's going to be Rocket Watts. This is, and you guys have heard me talk about this when we come on and we do this podcast every year. It always seems like I have a guy, right? Like we had this conversation about Kendrick Nunn before, and it's one of those things where Rocket obviously was playing well at Michigan State. He was a Big Ten all-freshman. Roles changed a little bit, so things changed. He went to Mississippi State, didn't work out for him there. He still shot it somewhat decently at times. But this is a fit here at Oakland because this is going to be the guy, right? Like he's not going to be Horizon League first team in the preseason. I get that, but he will be when it's over. Just trust me on this, guys, because what people don't understand that do the voting and things like that, this is a usage-based game. And Rocket Watts will shoot the ball maybe more than anybody in the Horizon League next year. And the points and his scoring will be off the charts in terms of the Horizon League. And there's, just speaking real with you guys, for Rocket, he knows the score right now. When you're coming into this situation at Oakland, there's a reason he went to Oakland, because guys are going to the NBA. Jamal Cain just Woj tweeted out today. Jamal Cain just signed a 2-year deal or a 2-way deal with the Heat. So him, Kendrick Nunn, etc. He wants to go to the NBA, and in order to do that, you have to put up numbers. That's just the way that it is. So he's going to have the green light, and obviously he's going to be playing with arguably the best point guard in the Horizon League in Jalen Moore. And that's, you can look at the numbers and say that. And remember too, those numbers that Jalen Moore's been putting up, those were at a reduced pace for Oakland. That will change this year. I'm willing to bet. And when I think when you put the analytics of everything together, you'll probably see this Oakland team 75, 80 possessions. This will be more like the traditional Oakland teams of the past, because as you brought it up, speed is what they're going to do, and they're going to look to go and rebound. Coach Kampe has said this privately, publicly. He'll tell you this at media day. He'll tell you this on interviews. Rebounding the basketball is going to be a concern. So, Rocket Watts may be the highest impact guy, but that's partially because Jalen Moore has been very, very steady, and you know what you're going to get. And what really stunk about last year was we saw how good that Oakland team last year could be when they won that tournament down in Florida against some pretty good mid-major competition. Remember, they beat Vermont and stuff like that down there. It wasn't just hanging out on the beach and drinking pina coladas. Like they played some good teams and they beat them. And Jalen, unfortunately, wasn't healthy. The final once the New Year calendar flipped, he pretty much wasn't healthy. And now Jalen Moore stays healthy. You have Jalen Moore and Rocket Watts. Show me a better backcourt. Like, we can sit down and have the discussion. And that's a very, very good backcourt, needless to say. Trey Townsend becomes a very pivotal player, because you have to be able to rebound the basketball at some point, because you're not just going to shoot 40% from three every night. And at some point, you're going to have to rebound the basketball. That's the concern. If anything, I can't tell you how it's going to end up, but it's going to be hella fun to watch. I know that. And this is, like I said, more of a traditional type Oakland team. And they're a lot of fun. There are going to be a lot of possessions. There are going to be a lot of points.
Neil,
I'll just jump in to say real quick. Yeah, definitely taking note of that, because I remember on this call last year, Neil was really hyping up Jamal Cain. And, knowing the pedigree that he had, I wasn't doubting it. But at the same time, we hadn't seen Jamal Cain play a game in the Horizon League yet. But, yeah, Neil was 100% on the money there. And, yeah, the news this morning that he's now on a two-way deal with the Heat, really impressive and great for the league.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's something, too, where those are the two things you have to do, right? As a mid-major league, you got to put guys in the league. You got to win games in the tournament at some point. And let's not play around. That's what the goal is. And we were talking about some of the other teams in the league, and we were talking about Fort Wayne, and how there comes a point where you got to take the next step. And that's what the fans care about, man. Like, things have changed, and as college basketball's changed, I think fans' perspective of it has changed. And we could go into the psychology of it and why it's like that, but we're a big event society now, and social media and all that kind of stuff. The team you root for, you want them in the tournament, because that's the biggest thing, and that's really what matters. So that's something where Oakland, Fort Wayne, all those teams, they want to get back there, no doubt.
I was just going to say, Neil, it's almost like you read my preview, which you haven't been able to because it comes out this week. And you and I have watched a lot of Oakland basketball in our time. And if nothing else this year, this team's going to be entertaining, because we've seen this style of Oakland basketball before.
No, it is too. And there's a great schedule too. There's a great home schedule. I think as far as non-conference road trips, all they have this year, we go to Syracuse, we go to Boise, and we have a tournament in the Bahamas over Thanksgiving. And that's it as far as trips. I'm talking like get on the plane and go trips. There's a week, and I don't know what the situation is going to end up being with Amani Bates, but there's a week in the season where Oakland hosts Oklahoma State at the Arena, I believe, on a Sunday. And then Thursday, Eastern Michigan's coming in. And like I said, hopefully Amani Bates is playing, or that all gets sorted out. But I mean, that's big time. So that's a lot of fun too, that we'll have that kind of home schedule, because let's be real also, as far as the Horizon League has worked, we haven't had marquee home games for Horizon League teams to play. And there's a lot of factors and there are a lot of reasons for that. But and we all know what they are. We talk about them all the time. But sure. It's big. It's big when you can get this, and Oakland's got it. So at a baseline, at a bare minimum, yeah, Matt, it's going to be fun.
Speaking of fun, Dan, obviously with big news, Antoine Davis is coming back to Detroit Mercy. Looks like this is going to be the year he's probably going to ultimately shatter the all-time Horizon League scoring record, maybe knocking on the door of a lot of different, at least top 10 of the NCAA. What I find interesting, though, and this is kind of in reference to the fact that I saw the article that came out of the Athletic with the Athletic earlier in the week. Apparently, we're the only people paying attention to him. I don't understand that one.
Yeah, I think when it comes to weird. You know what? And I think that's the way they want it. I don't think they want people paying attention to them yet. But it is truly amazing to get him back for a fifth year. I mean, how many times do we see talented players? And exceptional athletes and record breakers. How many times do we see those guys leave this conference? Too many times. And to see somebody decide to stick with the program, and I know his father's the head coach, so obviously there's a built-in advantage, but I mean, look, guys don't put their name in the transfer portal. 99.9% of the time, they're leaving. They're not coming back. So this idea, I mean, not every school has a father as the head coach. So, you understand why that is, but it's more than that. But, we're talking about a player now who's going to play his 5th season at the same university. And that just doesn't happen in today's landscape. And talking to Antoine, I asked him, I said, okay, so, there were other schools. I think BYU was in there. I think he talked with Kentucky, Maryland, Kansas State. They were all very, very much after Antoine. And I said, what was it that made you decide to come back? What was the biggest reason? And he just said, hey, look, Twitter is a dark place, man. And when people start talking and you're taking pictures in one jersey, then the other fan base that's has their team recruiting you, then those guys get upset. And there's just a lot of vitriol there. And he said the one thing that happened with Detroit Mercy was when I put my name in that portal, everybody supported it. Everybody encouraged me to look around. Nobody was upset. It would have been real easy for everybody to get angry with the fact that I put my name in. And never once did anybody ever give me a hard time, give me pushback. They let me go out there. They let me look around. In today's day and age, you have to allow that process to take place. It's like they say in relationships, right? If it's meant to be, it'll come back. But if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it was meant to be, right? So, but the funny thing is that Antoine's one of, I think, 2 players that had meaningful minutes last year who's on the roster this season. And when I first got to know Mike Davis and the coaching staff, one of the things that they said was, in a perfect world, the way we're designing this roster is as follows. We're taking players who played very little minutes at Power 5 programs, who have the background of being a big-time high school recruit, and we're going to take those players, and we're going to work with those guys. We're going to find out what makes them tick. And up until this year, I felt like they really couldn't execute that plan as well as they wanted to, for one reason or another. I think being banned from the postseason a couple of years ago had something to do with it. I think the first season, Mike Davis and his staff got in really late. But the last couple of years, I think they've had momentum in that area. So it's been encouraging, but it hasn't been, I think, to exactly what they've wanted. This year, I feel like they actually have what they want. And I think they're also kind of been struggling to find guys to buy into the concept. I think buying into what they're trying to do and how they want to build this thing. I mean, you look at some of the guys that they brought in this year, and I mean, you don't have to look very hard. I mean, we're all talking about former 4- and 5-star recruits, guys who played in Power 5 conferences. Antoine Davis has always carried so much of the burden by himself. He actually has some ball handlers in the backcourt that can help him out a little bit. I mean, it is a miracle that he has not suffered some type of a significant injury, given just how much the ball is simply in his hands. I mean, it just shouldn't happen. I mean, I think the guy's missed like 2 games in 4 years, so I'll knock on wood here. But I mean, there's a couple of other guys that they brought in. Jared Liddell was a former 5-star. He played 3 seasons at Texas. Last year was at Alabama State. Wanted to go to an HBCU, and he then got to know Mike Davis and wanted to come there. But Jared Liddell, he's a big time ad for them. I think they're really excited about him. TJ Moss, he was at South Carolina for a couple of seasons. He played like 55 games for the Gamecocks. He was a former 4-star. So, and there's a lot more that kind of fit that profile as well. But obviously, we all know who drives the car. It's the guy who's probably going to be the preseason player of the year, the guy who was a co-player of the year last year alongside Jamal Cain, and that's Antoine Davis. But, it's the last year of the contract for Mike Davis and his staff. So it'll be interesting to see how things look as we go into the years ahead. But obviously this year, I think they got exactly what they wanted.
All right. So I would be remiss if I did not include, obviously, Greg Registraw and Chris Collins into the conversation. Gentlemen, thank you both. As with everybody else, thank you both for joining us. Love your work. Appreciate you guys coming in.
You got it, bud.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, Chris, I wanted to ask you first because you had the opportunity to once again call a championship for Wright State. This time, probably a little closer than most of them. With that really exciting finals in Indy, does it get old?
It never gets old, and that was one of the better games that I've had the opportunity to broadcast. And there have been a few over the last 25 years that I've had the opportunity to call Wright State basketball, but I loved it. Up and down, two teams that know each other very well, and it came down to a final shot. It was great. It was wonderful for Wright State. They were able to go into the NCAA tournament and get their first NCAA tournament win of program history.
And so the other thing too, and Greg, obviously you were there as well. Being in Indianapolis, you were kind of you were the MC for all the post-game press conferences, and well, you actually had a little bit of a more unique situation in IUPUI, which had a dwindling roster throughout the season. I know it was really not hard to keep up with the roster names because they were all basically the same 5 or 6 guys near the end of the year.
Yeah, thankfully for the last game, we didn't have a sponsor for bench points. We didn't have a bench since 5 guys played against Oakland, and I thought those kids played their hearts out, and I thought because that was a competitive game until the end and acquitted themselves in tremendous fashion. And that was the thing that you hated for last year because we knew when the season started this was an under-talented group. When Zach Gunn got hurt in October, and let's not let's not confuse things. If Zach had played, this is maybe a 10-win team. But if without him, who had been an experienced scorer at Ball State, you kind of knew points were going to be hard to come by. We guarded the heck out of people, but we couldn't score enough points to be able to stay in a lot of games or be competitive. So, last year is kind of like that season at Dallas. Chris will get that reference. You might be too young for it. The one that didn't happen at 3-27. But it's a crop of new faces, just a couple of kids that are back from last year's team. And do I think this is an IUPUI team that'll be atop the league this year? No. But do I think this is an IUPUI team that will be a lot more competitive and could potentially win a conference tournament game? Yes, I think that's a possibility for Matt Crenshaw's team.
And Matt Crenshaw is not messing around this year because he got like a bunch of, on top of all of his scholarship players, he got a bunch of walk-ons. Right. Clearly, under no circumstances is he going with 5 guys again.
Correct. And let me walk people through kind of what happened. So we really started the season with like 11 guys because there were a couple of walk-ons that we simply weren't going to play, just with the idea of, hey, they were going to be able to play elsewhere and be kind of a redshirt year for them, etc. So we had 11 guys at the start of the year, and in mid-December, the injury started. Heck, we lost a guy with a season-ending foot injury during warm-ups. That was kind of a sign as to what was going to come. We actually got to January 31st, and we're down to 6. We remarkably played an entire month with 6 guys, and it wasn't until the last game against Green Bay where Bakari Lestrap turned his ankle in the first few minutes, and we were down to 5 for the rest of that game. I'm amazed we played with 6 for as long as we did and got away with it. But to your point, I believe there are 15 or 16 names on the roster. There are many more walk-ons this year if needed. There will be a taxi squad just in case a problem pops up this season for Matt Crenshaw's team.
That's a taxi squad. Now that's a unique concept. But if I'm Matt Crenshaw, I'm not tempting fate next year.
Right. No, you're there might be 25 guys in the roster next year. So.
So Chris, obviously, the big thing with Wright State is that Grant Basile is transferred and Tanner Holden is transferred. Now, normally that would be a source of concern, but that is coming also on the heels of that. Amari Davis, who spent the last couple years in Missouri, and then Blake Sisley are coming in. Plus, and I keep saying this, I know Scott Nagy has a couple of big guys we don't know about that are just going to crop up and do stuff. I just know it. I know this is going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. I think at first when both of those two talented players left, Tanner going to Ohio State and of course Grant Basile going to Virginia Tech, there was some worry. But the coaching staff, they say that these two talented players fell right into their lap. The Raiders were very fortunate to get this guard from Missouri. Horizon League fans very familiar with Amari Davis. He began his career at Green Bay. Now, he is a kid locally from Trotwood Madison High School here in the area, and some of the coaching staff at Wright State has a history with him. And Travis Trice is the one I'm speaking of, the assistant coach. So Wright State was very fortunate to get him. Blake Sisley, he's a kid that I know Greg's really familiar with. He's a kid out of Evansville, Indiana. The Raiders actually were recruiting him heavily when he was coming out of high school. However, he decided to stay home local at Evansville, but there was a coaching change, and he had contacts with Wright State coaches, and he decided to come to Wright State. And I know Scott Nagy's really excited about having him a part of this Raiders team. Now, from what I understand, he's an outstanding offensive player, and that leads me into really the question mark going into this season. This is going to be a bit different Raider team. They don't have the rim protector that they've had in the past with Loudon Love and Grant Basile. They've got some big guys in there, and you talked about it earlier. Who's going to be the guy who's going to step up? Here's the guy to keep an eye on. Maybe not early in the season, but this kid has tremendous talent. His name is Brandon Knoll. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's from Chillicothe. He's not played in 2 years, but he's a young man. He's about 6'8", about 235 pounds, but he is extremely quick on his feet. He has a lot of mannerisms, and please, Dare, he kind of reminds me a little bit, but let's give him a little time, of a former Butler player in Matt Howard. He's that kind of, he's that kind of kid. He's got that kind of ability, but we'll see if that transpires. But
I'll jump in here as well to talk about Blake, just knowing him the way that I do. So Blake's dad, Matt, played at Southeast Missouri back in the mid-'90s. His younger brother, Trent, is a high major recruit and is one of the top sophomores or juniors in the Midwest at this point, if not the country. Blake was an Indiana All-Star a couple of years ago, and that was in a year where there were guys that were going to major college programs that didn't make the All-Star team. And Clint Sargent knows this state very well. Yep. Obviously, Travis Trice, being from Princeton, having played at Purdue and Butler, knows this state very well. And so the Wright State has planted a recruiting flag in Indiana for kind of specific kids that fit what they want to do. Obviously, Welledge being a Greensburg kid that's back as a rotational piece. And Chris's assessment on Sisley is spot on. Offensively, he is as talented as Grant Basile. Even though he's kind of equal from a size standpoint, he's not the physical presence that Grant was, that clearly, because there's few guys in all levels of college basketball that are as physical as Loudon Love was in terms of playing for the Raiders. He's a great find, but it does change what the interior looks like for the Raiders a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't have the rim protector, but they're going to rotate a lot of guys, in and out. Another guy I want to mention, he may not see a lot of time early on, but he has a tremendous talent as an all-state player, Dre Carter. He is a long wing, a big wingspan, about 6'8". He plays guard. He has got an enormous amount of talent, but as you well know with Coach Nagy and his history, they can develop players. He, along with Clint Sargent, Travis Trice, Dan Beret, this staff, that's one thing that they're well known for, and that's developing players, and they're patient with them. But I want to throw another name out there, Alex Hubricks. He did not play most of last year, was injured. I don't think he played after the Purdue game early last year. He had some back issues, but he is back 100%, and he is an outstanding three-point shooter. He's a kid who can come off the bench, and drain a few threes and kind of extend the defense a little bit. So I think this is going to be a deeper team, although in the past, Coach Nagy's history is that he doesn't play more than 7, no more than 8 guys, but he may be forced to, because he's got a lot of talent sitting there, and you want to be able to use it. I didn't mention A.J. Braun. He was a kid who played as a freshman last year. He was originally scheduled to be redshirted, but he'll continue to develop at the 5 position for this team. And don't be surprised, a young man, Andy Neff, who came back for a 5th year, he was just awarded a scholarship. He's been a walk-on player. The coaches think highly of him and the amount of minutes he'll be able to get. Not many, but he'll probably see a lot of action this year.
The funny thing about Andy Neff, and I think everybody remembers when you did that stretch, that road stretch between with Robert Morris and Youngstown State. We did see a lot of Andy Neff because everybody else was sick, including Scott Nagy.
Yeah, they weren't there. That really basically only had 5 or 6 players, and I know, Greg, you're not going to feel sorry for us because that's something you guys had to put up with all year. But that was an interesting stretch. They could have won both games, but Youngstown was a little bit too much. However, Andy had been bumping with Loudon Love and Grant Basile for years. So he has earned his right now to get a scholarship, and he's just a great kid. And I don't know if anybody had an opportunity. You can see it at the Wright State basketball website, how it was awarded by Coach Nagy, and surprising him at practice, not too long ago, earlier this week, actually. And it was a very emotional moment. And it's the first time I've ever seen Coach Nagy show any emotion. I mean, at all like that. So it shows you how much he really believes in this kid.
Oh yeah, we actually retweeted that. So yeah, that was a great moment. Greg, we talked a little bit about Zach Gunn. He's obviously back this year. Is there anybody in particular from IUPUI that we should be looking out for? I know we've heard a little bit. I know we've heard about the San Diego transfer, Bryce Monroe.
Yep.
And so I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the Girard twins personally.
Yep. And let me start with the Girard twins. And again, I referenced Blake Sisley being an Indiana All-Star 2 years ago. Ahmad Girard was an Indiana All-Star this past year. And again, for people that don't get the reference, the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star Series, the equivalent would be Ohio versus Pennsylvania in football, the Big 33 game. And there is a guy that has played the National Football League from that game 50-something years running. Indiana-Kentucky is very similar in terms of the basketball rivalry. On the guys' side for high school basketball, it's been dominated by Indiana as of late. But if you look at those rosters, I mean, let's face it, from the game that Sisley played in 2 years ago, or I guess 1 year ago at this point, Blake Wesley's already in the league that played at Notre Dame for a year last year. So if you make the top 13, 14 players in the state of Indiana, you're good. And Ahmad Girard was that type of guy. And so he comes in as a difference maker immediately. Good. What you see from IUPUI this year is length and athleticism at the wing position. The guy that I think Horizon League fans will soon learn about is John Egbuda. He is a young man from the Bronx. He played in the Kyle Guy Pro-Am locally. And Kyle, of course, is the former point guard of Virginia when they won the national championship, who is from Indianapolis, is now playing in Spain. Kyle put together a Pro-Am this year, and former NBA players played in it, current NBA players played in it, guys that play overseas. And in the championship game, John more than held his own in a game where of the 15 players that played in the game, 14 of them were either going to play Division I basketball, had played Division I basketball, or were playing professional basketball at that point. So he also happened to win the dunk contest for that league this year too. So Egbuda is a guy that can fly. Another guy is Vincent Brady, who's a local product from Cathedral High School in Indianapolis that originally went to Air Force. He has then transferred home to play at IUPUI. And so you're going to see a lot more length and athleticism at the wing position. That's the biggest difference in this IUPUI team, what you saw from a year ago.
One last thing before we go, I wanted to ask both of you guys, obviously the announcement was made that the Horizon League tournament is going to be back in Indianapolis until 2026. So given that, obviously, Greg, you're local, and Chris, the Indianapolis is in close proximity to Wright State, where do you see this specifically this the championship in Indianapolis growing in terms of how the Horizon League is progressing?
Yeah, Greg, go ahead first since you're the homestander.
So I'm literally doing this interview from my backyard. If I got to my roof, I could see the Coliseum from where I live. I'm about 20 blocks away. And so I am sort of partial to it being played here.
I have a feeling.
I like events that are in my backyard. But from a locale standpoint, obviously it is the perfect center of the league, knowing that the longest trips in the Horizon League would be from Green Bay or for Robert Morris. We had a phenomenal crowd for both championship games with IUPUI's women playing in the afternoon. But with NKU and Wright State, who, let's face it, are the two best programs from top to bottom in terms of talent, in terms of coaching, in terms of fan support, in terms of venue, but also because of their proximity to Indianapolis, we had a phenomenal crowd at the game last year. The venue, which seats basically 6,500, is perfect in terms of being able to easily fill it. From a standpoint. So as long as you are going to go the neutral court route with this tournament, and the league has kind of bounced back and forth from neutral court to home court advantage over, say, the last 20 years, from a neutral court standpoint, this is the absolute perfect location.
Well, I agree. Indianapolis, and also it's home to me in regard to that's where I was born. And, I'm familiar with the area. I think if there's only one drawback is the fact that the location, I think it's for a lot of people have to get used to it. It's not easily accessible, right from the highway. But I don't think that really matters, to be honest with you, in my opinion. I think if you follow a team, you'll make the effort, to go that extra mile, so to speak, to be able to be there. But I think the biggest draw for me is, and you mentioned it, Greg, is the fact that when you can pack that place, and what's at stake, and that's a ticket to the NCAA tournament, I think was fantastic. That was one of the best atmospheres that I experienced last year. And I know a lot of Raider fans continue to talk about it because of the outcome of that game over in Northern Kentucky.
And to any and all Horizon League fans, on Twitter at Greg Rakestraw, if you need directions, if you need places to go, if you need fat guy recommendations for food, I'm here for you. Hoosier hospitality is real. I will help everybody out to enjoy their 48 to 72 hours in the Circle City.
I wish I'd known that earlier. Sorry. I got lost. Greg. By the way, to your point, Chris, I got lost twice going to the arena last time. Twice.
You got lost twice?
I got lost twice. That's fun.
Oh my. Okay.
That's twice too many, buddy. I'll help you out. We're good.
Yeah. Well,
I figured it out after the last time.
I'm just throwing it out there, from what I've heard, but again, when it gets down to it, you're going to go anywhere you have to go if your team has a chance to get to the NCAA tournament.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys, and thanks to everybody for once again another awesome media forum. So I think next week we're doing post preview week, so that's going to be back to back with me, John, and Matt. So Until then, HorizonRoundtable.com. That's where our content and past episodes are. You can find us wherever podcasts are found, and of course you can pull us up on your Amazon or Google devices. So tune in next week. You definitely don't want to miss that. Until then, thank you all for listening.